Hi, Martha. How are you?
Hi, I'm good.
Okay, we're going to wait a few minutes to see if everyone wants to ask us something. And if not, I will ask you the questions that people have sent me.
Sure.
Have you decided yourself if you're sending your child to childcare in September?
Yes, I think she will probably have to go because I have to go to work, but it will depend on whether I can be flexible, and my husband's going to be a bit flexible with work, so she might just be going only a few days or maybe a day. So, but I think for her it'll be nice to do it because she's never done it before. So it'll just be nice for her to kind of build it up gradually. Yeah, she's just been with us this whole time, so she'll be nearly 2. So I think it's probably good for her.
That is, I think, one of the questions that was sent related to that, because one of the parents that haven't been in childcare, the children haven't been in childcare yet, said will lack of interaction with other infants affect social and personal development. So people might worry that my child is growing now. At this age, they should be having interactions with other children their age, but they're not. Is that something that you worry yourself as a mother?
No, I do not.
Good. That's good. Tell us why.
Because, I mean, infants are up to the age of 2. And actually, until the age of 3, children don't really play together. They play side by side. They watch each other. They learn from each other, but they don't play together. So that's an adult concept about playing and socialization. But in terms of child development, the most important thing for their development and their socialization is that they have connections and relationships. And that can happen with an adult. So if your child is at home with a caring, loving adult and they have opportunities for play and learning through play, they are developing normally. They do not need to be in interaction with other children to develop socially. But I think it's a very unique question because I think some children may not have those resources at home. Some homes are, in terms of space, they might be quite cramped. It might be quite a stressful environment for them. It really depends on how many family members are around and can offer attention to the child. So I think for some families and for some children, going into childcare, whether that's nursery or school, is really positive for their social development, even as an infant. So I think it's about what they're getting already at home. But it's not essential. You know, even things like baby groups, they're not really for the babies. They're for the mums because it's really important as a mum.
Which is important for the mums to socialize with other mums and feel supported and talk, and then by that the children benefit as well.
Yeah, they benefit because we feel happier and we're more if you're socializing, you have friends and you have good social support, then your child will benefit from that, but more than it's them socializing with the children. That comes later when they're much older. So right now, for example, my real concern is for the teenagers because their development is all right now at their age. It's all about being with young people of their own age and differentiating from the adults and their parents. And at the moment, it's their social development and their personal identity development that's been affected in lockdown. It is not the children and the infants. They're fine.
But I think one of the worries, at least from the parents that come to Kikiriki, is not so much about interacting to other children, is that the parents have to work and they cannot give them the attention.
Yes.
And that's, I think that worries them more than not socializing with other children, not being able to be with them 100%.
Yeah, but one of the things I say to parents is children do not need you to be with them 100% of the time. They don't need it, and it also does not benefit them or you. So the important thing is that you spend focused quality attention with your child. And research tells us that can be as little as 10 minutes. That is all you need. So if you
mean a day?
No, across the day. Yeah, 10 minutes. Focused attention.
Okay, tell us more.
Yeah, 10 minutes. So it's 10 minutes of full dedicated attention to your child. So that means phones are off, You are not talking to another adult. You're not distracted about lunchtime. You are focusing on your child in doing an activity that is pleasurable to them. And usually that will be play, because we're talking about small, young children. It could be something physical as well, like, you know, running around the garden together or whatever. But it is that focused 10-minute attention that makes a difference. It is not spending 24/7 with your child, because that's unrealistic and that isn't what children need. Children need distance from their parents as well. They need time to develop independent skills like playing independently. It's really important to them. Really important for them to develop skills and learn strategies to manage distress when mom and dad are not in the same room or around with them. It's really important for their resilience. And if, as a parent, you're trying really hard to keep your child happy all the time, I would say that isn't your job. Your job is not to make your child happy. Your job is to help your child develop skills that make them resilient and help with their development. So if those 10 minutes, I think some families at the moment, they can only spend maybe 20 minutes across the whole day. So think about 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes in the evening, and make them really special. And the rest of the time you're there, but you might not be able to give them 100% of your attention. And that is okay. It's not possible to do that. You can't, it's not like a realistic expectation that, so it's about pockets of time that are meaningful to your child. And yeah, and the evidence base is there to say that's really important. So your child can play and you can be at work and you're not giving them attention. That doesn't count as 10 minutes of I gave my child attention. Being in the same room as your child is not giving them attention. So when I say 10 minutes, I mean real focused, you know, dedicated.
Yeah, one-to-one if you have more than one child.
Yes.
And completely 100% focused attention.
Yes.
Okay. If anyone, I don't know, people that are watching, can you say hello? Because I'm not sure if the comments will work. Can someone say hello in the comment while I look for the next question? So someone said, how can we support students or college who have suffered a loss during the pandemic? What to say or not to say to them?
Yeah, I think this is a really common question at the moment. So I talk a lot about death in my NHS practice because I work with children who have life-limiting conditions and life-shortening conditions. And one of the things that I've learnt from working with families who are bereaved is that it's really important that you talk about death in a very honest way with families. So often we feel scared about bringing up the concept of death. It's quite an emotive subject. But what I would say to teachers or, you know, colleagues who feel like they want to talk to families or understand it is talk to them about it in a real honest way. So say to them something like, I'm really sorry for the death of X or who, you know, whoever it is. And then ask them, like, how can I help? I want to be helpful. I want to do something to remember, maybe. So remembrance is a really big concept. At the moment, funerals and cremations, like the standard rituals that we usually do, are very different because of physical distancing. So you might want to speak to the family affected and find out how they're remembering their loved one. And is there a way that you can contribute if that's what you want to do? Is there something that you can do with that child when they're with you, if the family want you to? It's really important to check because some families will not want the death to be talked about. Some families won't want you to do something with the whole classroom or the whole, you know, all the children to write a card. Some families won't want that. They'll feel like it's too private and they want the school or the nursery to be a safe place for their child where the death isn't thought about. And for some families, they will want that remembrance. They'll think that's a really touching, important thing, like their child has a space outside of their home that they can talk about it. So think about it, talk about it. I've written like a blog about death, and I've also got some videos about talking to children about death. So if anybody really wants to like think about these topics a bit more, you can go and have a look at one of my videos. But the most important thing is go and talk to the family and find out how you can be helpful.
And if for example, I'm going to put it in example of Kikiriki, if it's someone little that is not talking, but you clearly see they're suffering and the mum said they're happy for you to talk about it, what kind of things would you say? Would you ask them to bring a picture or do a drawing about that person? What kind of thing would you recommend?
Yeah, both of those are good. Children below the age of 7 don't understand death. So that's something I need to kind of share. So before the age of 7, death is too abstract. Children only understand the world based on what they see. So if they see something, it exists. If they don't see it, it's not real. So death is a magical process for children. Going to heaven is a place. So a lot of people talk about going to heaven, and children will sometimes want to go to heaven and visit. Children don't understand the permanence of death. So often children will ask, will they come back? When will they come back? That is because they can't understand it. They will not be able to understand this person is never, ever coming back. It doesn't make sense to them because that's not in the world that they can see. So the way to talk to children about death, if that's what you're doing, is to be very concrete. So use words like death and dying rather than, oh, I'm sorry you lost, for your loss. Because children will think you've lost grandma or grandma has got lost. So children are very concrete about language at that age, below 7. It's more about thinking about, if mum is saying, oh, our child's really upset, like you said, I would ask mum what would help them. Do they want to bring a picture? Do they want to have it there somewhere? Do they want a space to talk about it? Some families create memory boxes. Maybe they want to bring some items from the memory box to your setting as a comfort for them. But I think with children, when they're really little, it's just, if they're feeling a bit anxious or a bit sad, it's just about giving them that comfort and that space, whether that's physically or just talking to them. So yes, drawing is good. Play is excellent. So children talk in their playing, and you will hear them say things connected to what's worrying them. And then that's your way in to kind of play with them and try and understand what they're talking about. But just remember that death is really abstract to them. So they might ask lots and lots and lots of questions, but they don't get the meaning of death the way that we do. It's really loud. I don't know if it's me or if it's you.
Say again?
It's quite loud. Is it me or is it you? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you okay. That brings me to a similar question that I think someone asked, that they emailed me, because some children are going to return to school and nursery in June, but they will still not be able to see the grandparents. So it's like they lost them. They haven't seen them for months, so they can see the teacher. It might not be the teacher from before, but they can see the teacher and some of their friends, but they still not be able to see grandma. How can a parent explain that to their children?
It's really difficult. I think this is such a tricky scenario. I think you just have to explain it, which in a way that is positive and makes sense to your child. So you can say it is safe to go back to school now, but at the moment, it is not safe to see grandma and granddad face to face yet, but we can do lots of video calls and we can send them letters and we can, you can stay in contact and connect and think of memories and all of that kind of stuff. But I think it's about reminding children that they are safe. That is the most important thing. It is a lot of what we're saying to lots of young children is not just the words that you're using, it is how you're doing it. So if you're feeling quite anxious, then your child will feel that. And what they'll take is not the words that you're saying, they'll just take the emotion. So it's really important that when you're sharing anything to do with school or nursery, if that's the decision that you've made, that they're going back, that you do it in a really positive way, because your child will not remember the words you used, but they will remember the feeling you gave them before they went. And with grandma and granddad, it's about just acknowledging that it's really hard if they're missing them and kind of being honest about how you feel about it too. You can say, yeah, I miss them too. And then think about something positive that you can do to connect your child with grandma and granddad. Like I said, like cards, or should we make something for them, or video calls. But I think, the words, keep it very simple. Always be honest answering their questions. Remind them about safety and make it really positive if you can. They're the key things, really. It's a really
a live question. If I put it there, can you read it?
So a mum lost her mum when giving birth to her. Okay, a mum. I think I'm not understanding this question.
A mum lost a mum when giving birth to
her
a child, must be, no? A mum.
Could you give some tips on how to support a new mum who's struggling with the loss of her own mum? This is a really big question. I think it's a very individual question. I think if Gareth wants to get in touch with me, I'm happy to talk about it. I just think it's such a personal question that if I answer here in like a forum which is much more general, it's not going to come across in a very useful way. But there are resources on my website about grief. And I think if you are struggling with a bereavement at the moment, it's really important that you do get support. There are lots of charities offering support and lots of information. So have a look on my website, like Cruise Bereavement is a very good place to start if you haven't looked at anything before. And as I said, I'm happy to discuss outside of this live because it's such an individual question. You're welcome. I'm sorry, I do want to be helpful, but I think it'll just become a bit personal.
Another question that was sent was, should we be concerned about changes in behavior, like wetting themselves, not realizing when they need the toilets during this period of stress? Do things usually return to normal when the routine returns?
Yeah, I think this is a really good question because lots of people are struggling with this at the moment. So young children respond physically to anxiety and stress. But the thing that children respond to the strongest about is when there's been a change to their routine. And at the moment, there have been massive changes to children's routines. So I just want to say that toileting problems, feeding, like children becoming fussier with food and also struggling with sleep or bedtimes, they're all very, very common in the current situation with young children. Yes, it will return to normal when routines get back, but there are things that you can do now. So one of the things might be that you have to go back to using strategies that you used when you initially toileted your child. So more regular prompting, maybe taking them to the toilet at key points in the day, using any strategies that you found helpful at the time. So I would put them back into place because it will make it easier and it will make it shorter, the kind of toileting issues that you're experiencing. And also having a think about why they're happening. So have a think about the triggers. So for some children, it might be that they need more one-on-one connection, more of those 10 minutes of focus time. They need more of that. They need more comfort, maybe. Have a think about whether they're just getting distraction. So they're getting distracted by, they're not listening to what their body's telling them because they're having lots of fun, or they're playing with their siblings, or they're playing with you, whatever it is, because they're not in the usual setting, they're getting distracted and they're forgetting to go to the toilet. So again, think about the prompts and the reminders. And just to remember that this is involuntary. Children don't have toileting accidents on purpose, as frustrating and exhausting as it is, because I know it's really exhausting to kind of have to redo the toileting again. So have a think about trying to stay really calm and be really consistent in your approach. So go back to those strategies, use the same strategy over and over again. Try and use maybe rewards, reinforcements, kind of, be really positive about things. Don't, try not to tell them off, even though it's frustrating, and it will pass. The only time that I would say be worried is if it keeps going on for like more than 3 months and on a regular basis, which means every day, or at least 5 days a week for 3 months. Then I'd be concerned and maybe go to your GP because your child might be suffering from a urinary tract infection, or perhaps consider constipation. Some children are getting constipated at the moment. Change of routine, change of diet, and constipation can affect bladder emptying. So have a think about adding more fiber and making sure your child isn't constipated if they are having accidents, because there can also be a link with that. I hope that
to clarify, that you mean that during the day, you don't have to worry if your child wets the bed during 3 months, do you? You're talking about something that is happening during the day or also at night?
Yeah, either during the day or at night. I think if your child was fully toileted and they've regressed and they're having accidents and they persist for 3 months, then I would get them checked, especially if you put all these strategies in place. So if you've, offered them comfort, tried to think about the triggers, put in toileting strategies and your child is still struggling, then I would do that. It's good to check.
Okay, can you see the next question? How to help children understand social distancing as young kids, they struggle to maintain distance?
Yeah. I think it's really difficult. I think, how do you explain social distancing? I think in terms of like in primary care and when you end up at school, I think it's the role of the teachers to keep children safe as possible. I think it's about being very gentle about the approaches that are being put in place. So it's more about how you put it in place than what you do. So they do struggle to maintain distance, but it's about helping them think about personal hygiene. So simple things like washing hands, which really we should all be doing. Like we should be washing our hands after we go to the shops and we come home, just a standard. We should be washing our hands after we've been on the bus, just a standard. You should wash your hands before you eat, after the toilet. These are all actually the washing hands and all of that. To me, they're personal hygiene concepts. They're concepts that we should be teaching our child in the same way that we teach toileting, which is a good example because it's about a routine and a habit. It doesn't have to be based on fear. It can just be based on this is something that we do because we're healthy, like brushing our teeth. We wash our hands. And when we go outside and we touch lots of things, we wash our hands. So if your child is going to nursery, etc., and they might touch each other, it's going to happen. I think it's impossible to think that children are going to keep in their own little boxes, like separate from everybody. It is more about making sure that their hands are clean and that they regularly all wash their hands, but done in a way that is like, so now it's time to wash our hands, rather than, don't touch. Okay, now go wash. Because it's the fear. It's like, oh no, I touched my friend and now I have to wash my hands. Like there's something wrong with my friend is dirty, or there's something wrong with touching. That's the bit that's really important to protect our children from. But if they're playing and you see them touching, I wouldn't like scream or shout at them or tell them off. I would, whenever it's appropriate, in a very gentle way, and they're no longer playing together, they're going to go off and do a different activity, you get them to wash their hands. That's all you have to do. You just have to like move them to being like, okay, well now we're not going to do something else, so let's all go and wash our hands. And I think also if you do it together, it normalizes everything. It really helps, even if you have hand gel, you said, right, let's all use a bit of hand gel because we've all been playing in the playground, so it's time to do something else. It's just, basic hygiene. That's how I think about it. It's about helping our children think of little rituals that keep them safe at all times, not just because of coronavirus. There are lots of other germs, like out there. So we're just protecting our kids really and ourselves. So I think that's what I would do and think about doing.
That is very useful for school, but she's asking about maintaining distance, and she lives in my road, and we say hello when we clap on Thursday. We say hello, but maybe she won't just. How can you explain it? You can say hello, but you have to keep your distance. And even if he goes to nursery or school, you can see your friends and your teacher. But still, if we go on a walk and you see a friend or a family member, you have to still keep your distance. That's a really big and difficult concept for children to understand. So how can we help them understand that in school they're going to play with a bubble, at home they play with the siblings and parents, and when we go out we just say hello. We cannot get closer than 2 meters to each other.
I think it's about just saying. So I don't know, and this is a different conversation, how people have explained coronavirus to their children, but that is something that I spent a lot of time talking about at the beginning of lockdown. And I think if you've explained coronavirus well to your child, because you have to use language that your child understands. Children don't understand the concept of germs or viruses until the age of 7. So similarly to death, it is abstract. You cannot see germs or viruses. So it means nothing to them. This thing means nothing to them. So it's more about saying to children that at the moment, we all have to try and keep safe because we're trying really hard not to get ill. Everybody's trying hard not to get ill. It's really important to stay safe. And one of the ways that we can stay safe is by washing our hands and staying physically separate from people that we don't live with. So that means that we can see each other, and now at a safe distance, and you can wave, and maybe you can have a conversation sat like a distance away, but we cannot touch at the moment. It's not forever. And you can say it's really strange for us as well, because I like hugging, or I like touching, or, you know, your friend down the road, we usually hug each other, and it's really sad, isn't it, that we can't do that. But instead, what we can do is we can wave. And instead, what we can do is, whatever it is, have a conversation. Or like I said, children like being creative. So I would ask your child, is there a way that they like to be close? So I don't like the word social distancing. It's a terrible word. It is not about being socially distant. You need to stay socially close. It is about being physically distant, and that is a different thing. So you can explain to your child that physically you can't touch, but socially, yes, you can be close, and there are ways that you can be creative about how you do that. So that's how I would do it, because and children, I mean, it's a hard concept for us as adults to understand and get our heads around. So it's even more difficult for children. And like I said, it's about not giving them fear about it, just reminding them that we're all doing it, and it's safe, and it's totally okay. So I'd be really light about it rather than it's really serious. It's okay, you know, it's totally okay. And if your child does run across the street and touches your neighbor's child, you know, relax, calm down. It's okay. Just do things, like I said, in order to keep safe and healthy. Wash their hands. You don't have to tell them off. Maybe remind them, remember, we can't do that at the moment. I know it's really hard for you and you want to give them a hug, but we can't do that at the moment. So that's all you have to do. And your children, especially young children, they take everything at face value. They might ask questions because children are curious, but they will take whatever you tell them. That's the world they see. So if you make it very normal and are able to say, I know it's really hard for me too, they will accept it, because children are incredibly accepting. I hope that helps. It's a really difficult one.
Yes. Sarah asked something, and Jessica, but Nikki asked a question that is related to this one, so I'm going to put Nikki's question first. She said, do you think it's practical to expect very young children to socially distance?
No. Well, I don't think anything is practical. No, absolutely not. I think it's not practical. I think if what we're saying is, like, at the beginning of lockdown, you stay physically distant by staying in your house, then yeah, it is practical. I think, you know, as parents, it's our responsibility to keep our children safe, and we have a responsibility in society to look out for each other. So, you know, you close your door, you stay indoors, and that's it. Now we're kind of saying we're making steps towards breaking physical distance or shortening the physical distance. It's become a lot more challenging. I don't think we can expect our children to stay physically distant if we are telling them they can go back to nursery and school. I think it's about the strategies that the staff, the teachers, you know, the care leaders put in place, and how they put them in place, that will continue to keep our children safe. And as parents, we can also do things when they come home to help us stay safe, you know, like, because they've been in contact with lots of people, and maybe as parents we haven't. If we've stayed at home and carried on working at home, then we're not the ones who are socially kind of interacting with others in a physical way. So there are things that you can do, like wash your children's clothes as soon as they come in, just as you would. So again, to me, this is just standard hygiene, but maybe it's because I work in a hospital for the NHS. But to me, when I come home, I always change my clothes and I always wash them. I just get into comfortable clothes as soon as I get home. You know, I strip off, because I come with stuff from hospital and I don't want that in my house. So if you think of that with your children, you know, they're in a school uniform. Maybe the sensible thing to do, or, you know, the nursery clothes, is to say, we're going to change you into something more comfy. What do you want to change into? So it doesn't have to be like, quick, take it off, you might have germs. It's more about, let's just get into something comfortable. We don't need to wear your nursery clothes at home. Stick them in the wash, on a high wash, you know, wash their hands, you're done. You know, that is the best you can do. I think that's the practical bits, but we can't expect the children to do it on their own. Not realistic.
That's very useful. And I really like your term about physical distance. I think the government should change it. You should write to them and suggest it, because it makes sense. We don't want to be distancing socially. We need to stick together and talk and support each other. So they should definitely change the time for yours, because so let me find Sarah's question.
All the children.
What about all the children and sleep? Maybe because they
Question.
concerned about everything that is going on, and they find it harder to fall asleep.
Yeah, so with older children, I don't know how old your child is, and obviously it might be different, but with older children, it's usually anxiety and or attachment. And they're both developmentally appropriate depending on the age of your child. So lots of children go through this. It's a phase. It's a really difficult phase. And yes, it can last, really sorry, some people will not want to hear this, but it can last up to until they're about 8, because it is to do with attachment, and it's to do with the fact that your child does not want to go to sleep by themselves, and it's very normal. There are lots of things that you can do to support them, which are to do with comfort during the day. So being closer to your child and giving them more physical presence and connection during the day. 9 and 12. Okay, so the 12-year-old and the 9, it might be different. Some of it might be attachment, but if so for attachment, it's about comfort during the day. So giving all of that time during the day so they feel connected to you, and then bringing comfort into their room. And there's lots of ways you can do that. So things like having something that smells of you. So think about babies. It's very similar to the sorts of things we do with babies. Think of giving them something that smells of you or feels like, for them, it's like the touch. It depends what, all children are different. So some kind of comfort that is linked to you. Think about putting pictures of you and them that they can choose really close to their bed so that they can see you. So if they wake up at night or they can't fall asleep, they can look at you. So you're still in their room, present in a different way. And there's also other things that you can do in terms of like smells and sounds. I've got a whole video actually on my Instagram. So if anybody is interested on the attachment bit, you can go and have a look at that. For older children with anxiety, if they are talking a lot about worries just before bed, again, that's very normal. Most of us our brains start to fire just before we go to sleep. And that also means it's harder to fall asleep. That is not the time to talk about the worries, because that can then impact on falling asleep further. But it's really important to acknowledge and to validate those emotions. So you can acknowledge it by saying, I know you're really worried, and you can preempt it. So that's what I'd say, especially with the 12-year-old. I would say before bedtime, if you know this is happening regularly, you can say, I know that going to bed is a bit difficult at the moment, and that you have lots and lots of worries. And then I'd remind them about the bedtime routine that they're going to have. So you're kind of saying, I know you're going to worry, and I know this is really hard for you. That's all you have to say. You don't have to solve it. But that can often help young people go, okay, so I feel worried. And then after the bedtime routine, if they start to tell you lots of worries, then I would write them down. You can have a thing called a worry jar. So you can write down the worries, and then you put them in a jar that they can decorate, do whatever you like. And you read out the worries that they've, okay, so you're worried about, I don't know what it is. You're worried about not seeing grandma. And then you fold it and you put it in the jar and you say, what else? You just ask them, give me all your worries, because I'm going to keep them for you. And then you lock the jar and you tell your child, we're going to talk about these worries tomorrow. In the morning, these worries are still going to be here, and we're going to try and problem solve them and work through them. But now it's bedtime. And then you set your limit. You can kind of say, I know you worry, and I know it's hard when mummy has to go now, but it's time to go to sleep. And then you leave. And then you can talk about the worries the next day. Any worries that need to stay in the jar because they're not resolved or are not able to be resolved, you put them in. And what you do then is you're protecting time during the day to say to your child, your worries are valid and we can work through them, but not at night. And often just writing things down and putting them somewhere safe can take them out of their head, but it takes time. So I think a lot of it is the work that you do during the day, not at bedtime. So a lot of the connection and reassurance and validating the feelings of anxiety or worries that they have during the day, not at night. I hope that's okay. I've written lots on sleep, so people can come and have a look.
Thank you. Yeah, that was helpful. And then Jessica said, how can I explain my child that some of his friends might be returning back to school, but he might not, as I don't want him to experience an isolation bubble at school?
I guess my question would be, do you have to explain it? If your child's not at school, he won't know his friends are at school unless they are talking about it. And if they are, then I would have an honest conversation with your child about the reasons why you don't want him to go. So this isolation, but you can say to him, school is a bit different at the moment. Mummy and daddy, I would be honest. Honesty from parents is really important with children. So you can say, I don't feel comfortable about you going to school now that they've changed. And I would tell him what the changes are. I don't know what they are, but you can say that to them. And again, it might be that your child is more upset about missing his friends rather than missing school. So I would have a conversation with him about you can either be. So my question is, does he need to know? Depending on his age, he might not, because he won't know his friends are at school. So do you really have to tell him? If they are older,
I know he's a reception child, so he's in reception.
He's in reception. Yeah. I mean, it really is a unique kind of situation for every family. Does he need to know? If you feel he needs to know, then talk to him early on. Don't wait for him to find out. Just tell him. Some children are going, that's how I would say it. Some children are going back to school, but we've decided that you are not, and this is why. And obviously your reasons will be unique to you. And just say it very simply. Don't go into lots of detail. So, for example, some children are going back to school, but mummy and daddy have decided that you are not, because we don't like the fact that you won't be able to play with other children in the playground. And then you say, how do you feel about that? What do you think about that? Have a conversation. But I would make it really simple and then go with their questions. Because what you might notice is your child goes, all right, and just keeps going. And so actually your big worries are gone. Or your child might be like, oh, why can't children play in the playground? And then you're having a different conversation. You're not having a conversation about why am I not going to school? He's like, well, why aren't they playing in the playground? And then you can talk about that. So that's what I would do. Talk to him. Oh, Loreto, I can't hear you. Can you hear me?
Sorry.
You're fine.
I'm mute because my children are doing the homework and then being a bit loud, but that's okay. It says, how can you help parents to combat fear as an educator or family supporter?
Yeah, really good question. I think
Jessica, say thank you, and then I'll put it back.
You're welcome, Jessica. I think the most important thing as an educator is to think about how you are going to fit these guidelines into your setting, what you're going to do to support the children's well-being at this time, which is really important, and then the way to support parents with fear and anxiety is preparation. So as soon as you can have an idea of how you're going to do it and what you're going to do, share that with families. Let them make an informed decision about the situation by telling them, this is how we're setting, these are the guidelines that we're going to follow, and this is how we're going to do it. And this is how we will support your child in a positive, safe way through this. And maybe offering parents, to come and ask you questions. I've developed a free workbook for families. It's actually for parents, for children up to reception age, and it's totally free. You can download it off my website for free under resources.
We can add the comments here later in the comments so that they can someone watch it later.
And then you can just, it's totally free. I just made it because there's so many families going through a similar situation. But a lot of my workbook is about get in touch with your school. Get this information from school. Or if your child is a bit older, get them to find out the information. So, because I think one of the really important steps in between now and June, when some schools are reopening, is to make that connection and build those relationships and get children to be able to kind of put school and teachers back into their minds. It's been quite a gap since they left school, but you also have to remember some of that gap has been half terms. So we've had half term next week, and we've had 2 weeks, so about 3 weeks of holiday within. So lots of parents are saying, oh my God, 2 months of school. And I'm like, but it's not 2 months.
I don't know if this is related to another question or the one that she made, but it's really hard when fear is what you get from media constantly. Yeah, I'm trying not to watch the news too much, just to read what the government is sending.
One of the things with the media at the moment is that it can be really anxiety provoking. So limit it. Limit it for yourself and your children. Do not put on the news like in the radio, like on the radio stations, they put the news like every half hour or so. I would be really careful about that. Put on a playlist rather than the news, and just decide a time where you are going to read the news or watch the news, but separate from your children. And I think limiting the news is a really important thing for our mental health as adults. But it's also very protective for our children, because there'll be words that they're hearing that they're not understanding, and it will just create confusion and fear for them as well. And also the media keeps talking about a mental health pandemic that's about to erupt, and it's just not true. It's not founded on any form of evidence. Families and children are incredibly resilient. It'll be a very small amount of people who experience trauma out of this. Most people will get back to normality and be completely fine, but it is how we talk about these moments that makes such a big difference, especially to our children. So think about that. Think about the language that you're using. So rather than, think about using the word safe rather than the word sick, for example. Like, we're staying safe rather than we don't want to be sick. Think about what you're saying and the message that you want to give your child in terms of reassuring them. And limit the media. The media is not helpful at the moment.
Another question we have is, could all these washing hands and not touching things create phobias for the future?
Sorry, I had a drink. This is a really interesting question. It kind of links to what I'm talking about, or have just been talking about. So phobias are an extreme fear of something that then impacts on everyday life. And washing hands does not have to be a phobia, because, like I said earlier on, washing hands is just part of standard hygiene. And one of the things I've learned is that maybe many of us are not washing our hands as much as we should. Like I said, if you go on the tube or you use public transport, you should always wash your hands. They don't disinfect the buses every day. So, like, if you think about it, it's not very nice. And it's not about being phobic about the germs. It's about being clean and being healthy. So it's more about how we're talking about the washing our hands, and more about, again, how we're introducing that to our children. So rather than being like, oh no, you touched that, quick, wash your hands. That's really like, it doesn't matter what you're saying. If you're saying in that way, quick, wash your hands, then children will take that and go, oh, something's really scary. And washing my hands is really important. But if you're just like, okay, so, we've been out and you've touched something out and about, or again, like they've touched a friend and they shouldn't touch a friend, but they did. It's all about saying, well, let's go and wash our hands before we eat, because, it's the healthy thing to do. And if you do it too, and remind them when you do it. So, as an adult, if you're out and you come home from work, which some parents have started to do, go back into work, as you come in, you can say, yes, darling, I really want to give you a kiss and a hug, but first I'm going to wash my hands because I've been at work. And first I'm going to take my clothes off because they're a bit grotty, and I'm just going to get a bit comfortable, and then we can cuddle. So if you model that behavior, your children will just do it because it's a thing you do rather than a thing they're afraid of. So it's a lot more about how you do it than the doing. Washing hands should not become a phobia. It's just washing hands. But it's more about how you present that to your child.
Thank you. Okay, I was going to read one more question from here. How can we support our children going back to school necessary if they are scared?
How can we support our children?
If the family decide they want them to go back to school, or
the child
a setting, and the child is scared, how can they support them?
Yeah, so I would, first of all, you need to understand those feelings, those scary feelings. So depending on the age of your child, maybe use drawing, maybe use play. Children, again, below the age of about 8 or 9, they're not going to sit opposite you and have a conversation like we're having. But if you use a different medium, like drawing, so if they say, oh, I'm scared about going to school, you can say, okay, can we do a picture? What does that scary feeling look like? Show me. What does it look like? And where does it come from? What are you scared about? So that, and they might draw like a big monster. Sometimes they're red, sometimes they're blue. These scary
Sorry,
monsters.
Martha, it links with the question that we just been sent, so I'll put it up there too, so you can reply to both at the same time.
Yeah, well, I'm talking about little children, 12-year-old. Yeah, he's a tween. I really feel for them. So I will talk about that in a second. So
yeah, because you have to do differently with the
hard.
different ages.
But yes, but I would do similarly. You need to talk about these feelings. So even with the 12-year-old, of course, but the 12-year-old, you don't need to draw it as much. You can if they're really arty or creative, or you can ask them to write a story, or something they're happy to share with you. But obviously with a 12-year-old, you can just talk. But with little ones, if they're scared about going back, then it is about kind of exploring the anxiety, the fear. And then what you need to do as a parent is focus on the things you can control. So you can control the things that are going to keep your child safe, both at home and when they're at school. So again, the whole, washing your hands and have fun. So what are they going to do to have fun? Because I think it's about the positivity. So positivity and enjoyment will kind of melt those anxiety feelings for young children. So my workbook, which I'm happy to download, anyone can download, talks about that a little bit to kind of help you think, well, what are you going to do at school? What are you going to do? What are you looking forward to playing with or doing? And if you remind them of those things, then that fear will also go away. And then you can think about, how the carers are going to keep them safe, who they can talk to, staff support, teachers, who are they close to in that school environment that they can, as an adult, go and talk to if they're feeling a bit scared, who's going to come and pick them up. So basically, some of the fear might be based on routine, like it's a change. I'm going back to school and I can't remember it. So you've got to bring back those kind of routines in a positive way, but talk about the fear and then focus on what you can control and the positives. And as this 12-year-old, which is very similar to lots of 12-year-olds and how they're feeling, I would talk to him, her, because it doesn't say if it's him. Oh no, it says him. I would talk to him about his feelings, and I would think with him about first acknowledge how difficult it is. I think it is the tweens and the teens that are really struggling with the separation, more so than anything else. And also as a 12-year-old, they understand the kind of the real threat of coronavirus, a bit more like an adult, not quite like an adult, but a bit more. And they are likely to be on the internet and therefore have access to news and have access to information that may be quite anxiety provoking. So you can protect your child from some of those things with parenting controls and limiting the news and all of that. But you can also set up family meetings. So this isn't something that lots of families have, but I do encourage it if you have a teen. You can set up a family meeting where you sit and talk about the news together. So either you watch the news together and you decide, so it could be the 5 o'clock news, like the briefing, something like that. You sit together and afterwards you talk about it. You talk about what you understood, what you're worried about, what you're interested about. Kind of start to talk to them like you would to an adult about coronavirus and the steps that are happening, that are moving forward. And in terms of supporting their feelings, think about what it is that they're anxious, angry, bored about. It's really hard. Try and think about ways they can connect with other young people. If video isn't just for them at the moment, they can do this kind of like meet in a park and like walk together somewhere, or, they could kick a ball together with their feet. They can do that. They just can't touch, but they can kick a ball around. It's exercise. So think about that. Be creative about it. Do they want to share letters, videos? Like kids are really into like taking videos of each other. Can they set up some kind of game that they can do as one of the young people I work with, they're doing like video journals of their day, and then they're sharing it around their friends, and then they're setting challenges for each other. And so think with your child about what would make this easier, but also just let them express how hard it is, because it is. And sometimes just sitting with the feeling is good enough. You don't have to fix it. You don't have to make your child happy. This is a really difficult situation. So with older teenagers, I would just validate that this is really hard and it's really unfair on them. And, they can come and talk to you and just show their upset, and you'll be able to just sit with it. You don't have to make it better. I hope that's okay. It's a hard
question. We've got 2 more questions that were sent. Let's see if we've got time to answer that. One of them is, I will ask whether or not returning to early year settings with the strict social distance measures in place, according to the government guidance, will have a positive impact on mental health of our youngest children.
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's not a question I can answer with a yes or no, because it's very unique to all families. So for some families where there is restrictions on space and kind of, it might be a really stressful situation to all be at home, especially if they live in a place without any outdoor garden or space to kind of run around. Actually going back, for a child to go back into a school setting might be a really beneficial thing for them and for their parents, both in terms of their mental health, but in terms of socializing and getting interaction and just having a breather. Because I think it's really important to recognize that in some households, lockdown has been really, really, really difficult. For other children, they might be getting lots of attention at home and lots of like positive interaction, and they might have space to kind of run around. And for some children, this has been the best time ever, getting attention from both of their parents and being at home. It's like an extended holiday. Some kids love it. So it really depends on the family situation. I think the anxiety that adults are feeling about it is very, very normal, because I think as adults, we're thinking about things from a different perspective from our children, but it's about how we manage our anxiety and our expectations so that what we share with our children is much more positive, like framed in a much more positive light. And just to remember that children are incredibly resilient. So most children will come out of this completely fine. Whether they go back into school, they don't come back into school, they will catch up. This isn't going to massively affect them academically or anything like that. I think much more about the teenagers in terms of their social development. But little children, like again, until like secondary school, they'll be fine, like academically, etc. So I think it's more about how, as an adult, you manage how you're feeling about this change, and the messages that you're delivering to your child.
Thank you. And the other one was, what is the best balance, staying at home where the environment is familiar and resources aren't restricted, or coming into a setting which will look very different to before, with expectations that are possibly unreasonable, but with familiar faces?
Yeah, so I think this is similar to my last answer. I think it's unique to each family. I think the balance has to be thought about as a family unit. So I think within each family, you need to have a conversation and think about what is best for you and your child. And whatever it is, then you can plan how to keep things safe and manageable, and staying in touch with your care providers, your school, your nursery, making sure that the information is clear, and if you're worried as a parent, that you can talk about it with teachers. And similarly, that teachers feel well supported to put strategies in place and that their well-being is thought about. I'm aware that lots of carers and teachers and nursery staff, they're feeling really anxious about having to go back to work and do all of this as well. And I think their well-being is really important, because if as a teacher you feel confident that what you're putting in place is good and positive for the children, then the way that you are is going to be very different to thinking, I have to do these guidelines, I don't agree with them, and I don't think this is good for the kids. That's going to come across in your work. It's not your fault, it's just the way that it is. So I do speak to teachers in schools and nurseries. So if you want some support thinking about that for your staff or for the well-being of your staff, I'm also happy to think about that. But I do think it's unique to each setting. So it's hard to give like a blanket answer. Like Loreto, your setting is very different from like a nursery that has like usually 35 children per room. So what you do is going to be very different in those two places. Is that okay?
Yeah, that answers the question. If anyone, we're about to reach an hour. If anyone has another question, I want to say thank you so much, Martha, for answering all the questions. They were all very helpful.
Oh, good.
And I'm sure people will find them helpful too. So thank you very much.
They're really important questions. And I feel like I've done a bit of a whirlwind of everything. But hopefully it's been useful and there's some things that you can take away from that.
Yes, yeah, definitely, lots of things. And as we said before, we're going to put the link of the document you mentioned before, and anyone can contact on your website. So if anyone wants to contact her privately, you're more than welcome to and encouraged to. As you say, as you could see, she's very helpful.
Loreto, I will send you the link and you can put it up because I won't know where to put it. So I'm just going to message it to you. Oh, thank you, Indra.
Yeah, so thank you.
I'm always happy to do another one of these in the future.
Yeah, well, if people want to keep saying more questions.
So if people think there's loads more questions, you know, as school reopens, etc., then and it feels useful, I'm happy to do another one.
Yes, me too. I'm more than happy to do one. Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for supporting us and being here with us and asking your very, very useful questions. So we're going to say goodbye now. Bye. Thank you, Martha.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.